Hi, all 30, 40 people maybe. Thank you for being here. Again, I'm Beth Mitchell, Salt Lake County Director of Performance and Innovation, and I'm here with Brittany, as you said, and Tyler, and we're gonna kind of just tell you a story. And so maybe first off, I would just wanna ask, who do we have here from counties? Anybody here from counties? I just want to kind of play it up for the counties because I feel like that's important. We often don't get the what works city stuff. We don't get the recognition we should. Just want to show a little county spirit there. Also, I know that we are the only thing keeping you from the happy hour, maybe one more presentation, and I'm exhausted too, and I'm even on mountain time. So, but we're going to tell you this story about a success that we had with our planning and development services team in Salt Lake City County. Okay, so my job, which has evolved, has been to kind of align data and the people in government in Salt Lake County to maximize our impact, but also to drive resources towards what works. We want to make sure that we have data backing up all of our programs, showing them that it makes a difference, but we don't want to just tell people all about our data. We want to actually, we actually want to track our data, and we want to invest in what works so that we can talk about our data and use it when involving stakeholders, when talking to county councils, and especially in communication with the public. So this has been kind of a culture shift. Everybody talked for a long time about moving outputs to outcomes, and I think that's important, and that's definitely been part of our process, but I also think you have to return to outputs, because in order to track whether you're kind of marking towards your outcomes, you need to get back to sort of what are those metrics you're tracking. So my personal recipe for innovation is engage, first and foremost, and that's that personal level, that personal connection. Then acknowledge. I think this is truly important piece that is often missed, is you come in and you say, oh yeah, data-informed decision-making, you guys are doing this all wrong, and show me your data. And I think it's really, really important to know that when you're starting a performance program, that you need to realize people have data they're already tracking. And those decisions are being made. Sometimes they're not doing it the way that the whole organization is doing it, but you really need to acknowledge that that's going on. The next part is to inquire. And I would encourage you all to read A More Beautiful Question, if you haven't read it. I think it's by Warren Berger. It's a really, really good book that kind of helps with all of this performance stuff. And the last is to empower. Because you need to empower. You can't just come in from on high and decide, okay, we're going to tell you about this performance and then ask you to do it. You need to make people want to do it, right? So that's what we try to do. And I want to give a shout out to Brittany Allen, who's a dear friend of mine. She's our Associate Director of Planning and Development Services. I always want to make her the director. But she was really, really easy to engage and empower, and that's why this is going to be part of our story. So just to go through a little bit about what we're doing in Salt Lake County, we have sort of a MetroStat performance initiative that has 3 parts. We have our dashboard, which Socrata so helpingly and lovingly put it together with us. And that kind of tracks things that the public cares about and that the mayor cares about, that rolls up to the strategic initiatives. And but that's the public facing. Then we have something called outcome stat, which is a term I stole from my friend Andrew Klein in Baltimore. And it basically is aligning budget to outcomes. And that's making sure that all of our kind of budget requests have outcomes and indicators and data sets. And then we have MIMs, which are the MetroStat impact meetings. And those are the ones where we do this kind of deep dive. So this is how we MIMS. So it's part framework and it's part facilitation. And I think I would argue it's also a little bit of therapy. And everyone can read, so I'm not going to walk you through this, but it is an organized process. It's somewhat a bit of cajoling some employees. It's a bit of enticement. But I think that what really we've discovered in Salt Lake County, and Brittany's going to go through in more detail, is that the Hawthorne Effect is a real thing. What gets looked at gets improved. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are going through the motions. And if you really get down and say, what is the specific division? What is the mission of our organization specifically? And then how do we go back to those pain points, not only what we're proud of, but those pain points, and figure out, how can we find the data to tell that story? So it's really been cool to do it myself because it's almost a bit of theory of constraints. You find the bottlenecks, you find the pain points, but when you're sitting with people, when they kind of have those aha moments, it can be really powerful. So this is kind of like the original, questions that I use when I'm sitting down with people. What's the mission of your division? And in Salt Lake, we kind of have divisions and departments flipped, so it's departments and then divisions are smaller. How do you know you're fulfilling it? And then what are you most proud of and what keeps you up at night? And then, of course, I go deeper and I ask, truly annoying questions for people like, the ones I get teased about. Now, why is that? And okay, explain that to me. Or everybody's favorite, why can't we? They really hate that one. And last but not least is, okay, so we don't have the data, but we can get it, right? Everybody loves that one. So now we're going to talk about, now I'm going to hand it over to Brittany for a second, who is the true kind of champion of the specific project we're going to talk to you about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so like Beth said, she called us together for these meetings and she asked us some questions, what we're most proud of and what keeps us up at night. We spent about 10 seconds on what we're proud of and the rest of the hour on what keeps us up at night. And for us, that is plan review. The plans that need to be reviewed before you can get your building permit. We were being inundated with building permit requests, and at the time that we started this process, we only had one plans examiner. We did get a budget approval to get a second one, but it took us 6 months to find somebody qualified to hire for that position. And so we had a big problem. We were doing about 230 permits a month and 125 plan reviews, and we needed to get them out in a timely fashion, and we really just didn't know how to do that with the staff that we had. So at the time, we were sending a large percentage of our plans out to a third-party reviewer to review them for us, and we were paying for that service. So we knew we were spending a lot of money on plan review. We had no idea how much. We didn't know if we were being efficient with that. We were just sending things out because we couldn't get them done. We didn't know if it was the best strategy. We knew we had a problem, but we didn't know how to fix it. So we started collecting data on everything to do with our plan review. How many permits we were doing a month, how many plan reviews, how many were being sent to a third-party reviewer, how much that cost. And not just per month, but per plan. So were we sending out the most cost-effective plans, or were we sending out ones that we should probably be doing in-house? So we started tracking that. It forced us to take a very good look at ourselves. It was easy to identify our strengths and our weaknesses at that point. And then we were able to focus on the areas where we were weak, which was the third-party reviews. So what we learned from this process was, like Beth said, what gets tracked gets improved. We started this in January of 2016. In May of 2016, we hit 100% of our goal for single-family dwelling permits being issued on time. In March of 2016, we spent $21,000 on external plan review, and we had sent out 30% of our plans to a third-party reviewer. Now we're down to 5.1%, and we've been consistently under 10% for the last several months. And so just by going through this process, we've been able to improve our processes. We're actually meeting our time goals, even though we're doing more reviews this last year than we were the 3 years previous, but we're doing it better, we're doing it more efficiently. People are very hesitant, like Beth said, to start this process. It's very time consuming, so we're trying to roll it out to the rest of our division at Salt Lake County, and I'm constantly telling the supervisors that work for me, I know you don't want to spend extra time doing something that you're already struggling getting done, but if you track this, I promise it will save you time in the outcome, or in the long run. One of probably the best things I think that's come out of this for us is that we have data available at our fingertips now. When the mayor's office calls, when the council office calls, I'm not scrambling to try to find those numbers. We have a bill that's at our legislature this year, and the sponsor gave us 1 hour to give them information on how long it takes to review a plan for a residential home. And I was able to give him that data within that hour. And it was exciting to know that, this process paid off for us and it had a real result for us. So now we're just expanding it out to the rest of our divisions so that we can continue to do quality work that we know is efficient and cost effective.
Okay, thanks, Britt. So here's the wisdom download. I would say that, everybody, I always say that government is a really big ship with a really tiny rudder. And it takes a long time to get things done. And you sort of have to be patient. And that's really hard for me. But I think you have to kind of find the hidden gems, the early adopters. This is something that probably many of you know. But if you're actually going through kind of these deep dives, and that's one other thing that's even not in my notes, that listening to Brittany just made me think of, that a lot of people think you have to have data on a wide range of points. And what we've found is that doing these deep level engagements is actually a much better way to bake in kind of that data-led decision-making into the infrastructure of your organization. And that, instead of looking at all of the outcomes, we only focused on plan review. And then when we got to plan review, you saw like the, tile floor of indicators that we had up there. And that was all just to kind of triangulate that one problem. And so I would encourage you to do that because it's really interesting. And then once you have those systems and those reports in place, it's easier to pull them. So educate and evangelize with humility. I think when you're working with frontline staff, I've worked in government almost 10 years, but I think it's really important to not come in as like, we are here full of oversight and we know, your job. Most of the time when you talk to people on the front lines, they know what the problems are. And it's really just helping them to kind of have the structure and the resources to find the data. And Brittany, I crunch numbers with her alongside her, so I have a better understanding of the process. Again, get down to brass tacks, find those motivated and committed colleagues. I think also find your early adopters and do pilots with them. I always say that there are some people in government who are worth getting way in the weeds for. Brittany is one of them. Lastly, I would say that data and outcomes, they're important, totally, but they're the means. They're not the ends. The ends isn't even transparency. People are the ends. If we get our act together around permitting, that means more money can go to programs that help people. It means people aren't waiting in line as long. So the end result, if you can keep your eye on that, I think it's really helpful. I also think it's good to have a support group of people who kind of are excited about this process. In Salt Lake County, we have sort of a MIMS advisory committee. We have we're beginning to have a peer network of people who've gone through the process who can sort of help other people and vent and, take to lunch, whatever's needed. I also think you need to have a plan with strong executive support, people to block and tackle, and to explain to people why this work is important. And last but not least, I would say, I've been watching The Crown lately. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Netflix. It's really good. But Winston Churchill, in particular, this quote kind of passed me by, and I saw it, and I thought it was a good one to sort of end with. So the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And which is probably obvious. I'm kind of a fanatical optimist. So anyway, thank you very much. And now I'm going to kick it over to Tyler, who's going to tell you how to do this in a structured fashion.
Thanks, Beth and Brittany. So we're continually changing. On the previous slide, my position actually has changed, and the title has changed, you can see. So I got a couple different titles here. So I'm the Organizational Performance Director for the City of Seattle. Just as a little bit of background, I'm going to go over Mayor's vision. Beth was talking about someone who's going to sponsor this and be an executive champion for what the work is, and we are very fortunate to have the mayor that we have. We'll talk a little bit about that. Our team, the department performance engagement, so that's really the deep dive I'm going to get into, and the examples with this department, Finance Administrative Services, and some lessons learned. So a little bit of background. So we started with open performance and put up measures on the website and used this very fine tool, and it actually has served us well, but we're at a couple years now and need to update the measures, see where we are. We've learned a lot more. We're also engaging a lot more people, and so these are going to be changing over the next year. So we're doing a very dedicated, deeper dive with the departments. This is Mayor Edward B. Murray. This is a piece of his State of the City speech, very similar to a State of the Union speech that may be coming out of a town near you, or near us, I should say. But all the pieces that are underlined there, data, goals, policies, funding models, transparency, accountability, the bottom line, better results in people's lives. Fundamentally, he believes this and had a charge on, we need to figure this out. So our team is a year old. We are the Performance Seattle program or Performance Seattle team. We're headed by our deputy mayor, Kate Jonkus, then myself and a couple other folks, very good, strong people. And we've organized ourselves into 4 areas. I won't get into all this, but the one we're going to talk about right now is the data-informed management for the team, or program, which is follow-up and operational performance. Happy to share more at another time. The team role. So there are 2 areas around this that we see ourselves working with departments. One is a priority issue engagement. So homelessness is a huge issue in the city of Seattle right now. And we're working quite a bit on that, which is spanning multiple departments, actually multiple governments, and our county in particular. And that is focused in an area that's either high policy priority or high community interest. But we also are engaging on departments on a deep dive, and that's what I'm going to go into a little bit about that, and that's looking at their details. So Department of Performance engagements, that's what we're calling these. The goals. Some of this is quite obvious, but some of it has not become obvious until we got into it and we started realizing, oh, this is what we're trying to accomplish. But building analytic capacity and leadership across the city government, establish performance measures, et cetera, all the way down to, again, provide excellent services to the public. So these were our meta goals of what we wanted to accomplish when we did this deep dive. Deliverables. So this was critical. In our office and our government, they're always asking, what are you actually going to deliver? And I want to hit each of these, even though you can see it here. But we confirmed lines of business with the department, actually engaged with them. And this engagement was 3 months long. So it was a journey. Revised set of department performance measures related within their lines of business and the data sets. Did a data gap analysis on each of those areas and each of those measures to find out, did they have data? Did they not have data? What are the challenges? Then we prototyped a business intelligence dashboard out of the information that we did have. And then plan for ongoing management analysis using the dashboard. What does that mean? That means what is the manager going to do with this information now? We actually made a very strong pitch and commitment that their director and their division directors and staff would be using this. This is critical. One of the challenges in doing this previously in the city of Seattle, and there were when I first started the work of leading this team, I was thinking, so we've kind of done this before, and we've had people say, oh yeah, this is about the 5th one that I've been through so far in their 30-year career. And I wondered what happened. And so a couple of the lessons learned from those were all the data was collected, that was all great, but then nothing happened. There wasn't follow through. There wasn't expectations set for using the data. There wasn't regular reporting or open to the public information. And that was one effort in '97, and there was another in about turn of the century, 2000. And so we really had to focus on how are we going to use this going forward. That was a critical piece that we needed to solve from prior failures. And then tiering the data. Some of the measures are for public view that would go on our open performance site, and some of them are just for mayor, internal review, and some of them, and you keep going down, department directors, divisions, and work groups. So on this one, I'm just going to flash through these really quickly here. This is the department I was mentioning. So the department has treasury and accounting and building and facilities maintenance, motor pool, animal services, there's animal shelter. So they have a whole array of different functions within their organization. It did end up lining up very similar to their divisions, but not exactly. And one key piece of going through this that I facilitated in their early discussions was, if you are going to identify what you do to the person who lives 2 houses down from you, and you're walking by, you're walking your dog, or they're mowing the lawn or something like that, you have a conversation, what do you do? That would be the focus of identifying your line of business. What I wanted to do was take them out of the structure of either the budget alignment that they have or their organizational hierarchy that's tried and true, not delete it, but just take it out for a minute and think about it in a different context, because then that translated more appropriately to a public audience, someone who's not familiar with the government. It also challenged some of their thinking when we did that. But these were the lines of business that we ended up with them. we did map on the budget all of their measures. So we end up with a lot of measures. And again, we tiered these. And many of them are for work group level or division level. And then I think for FAS we have 5 that are on open performance site, 4 right now, and we're going to add a 5th one. That was part of the validation. The reason that I wanted to do the pie chart, having been a former deputy director for budget office, was, hey, we have got all these measures, that's great, but where are they? And on a department that we had done a little bit of work with previously, we had, so say maybe the gray slice or the yellow slice looked just like that, whole bunch of measures. And then on the giant slices, the kind of maroon, red, and the blue in the bottom, there was 1 or 2 measures. And we're kind of thinking, a lot of money being spent in these other areas, we don't have measures equal to the number in the small slices. The learning about that was, and that I had anticipated, was the little slices, again, not this department, but a different one, that's where all of the media, that's where all of the high policy, that's where all of the emphasis on performance and data was focused, which is great, and it's important because in some cases it has to do with funding or it has to do with accountability, that they need to be reviewed. But there's also the brick and mortar or the bread and butter kind of stuff that you got to be looking at, which in many cases ends up being a significant part of the budget. So anyway, we wanted to map this out so that we understood, like, we're getting good spread here. So that felt good to us. Then applying business intelligence. So there's lots of different methodologies, and some of you have done it yourselves. But what we meant by this was, okay, this should inform or intel us on your business, your lines of business. This will help you see where your business is and what you're doing. That's kind of our focus on thinking about business intelligence. Didn't have to be a great curriculum where you needed to be certified black belt or something like that in Six Sigma or anything like that, but something that's just, again, straightforward and out of the box kind of thinking for a regular person. After we took a look at that, we played with a few different tools. Right now, we think we're using Tableau, and actually we did Dashboard, this department. I'm going to show that in a minute. But there are other tools, and we're also exploring with Socrata, how might we be able to work with them on developing or thinking about ways that continue to support the work that we're doing. And actually, we're very fortunate because they happen to be just down the street from us, or one of their offices, the main office. So it's really great to be able to have a conversation with them pretty easily. Operational data regularly updated and published into the cloud. So we've set up the structure, again, through that management and reporting. There's expectation that we will be reviewing this and revisiting it. And actually, we hope to have a really successful stat program where it is regularly looking at department data on this, just like folks in Salt Lake. Whipping through the last few of these. So this is just a screenshot of our Tableau, and this is a dashboard. So there are many different measures that are incorporated in this, and the idea I wanted to show here is that there are lots of different ways you can visualize what the data looks like, depending on what you want to show. Here's a data gap analysis of the FAS measures, 103 measures, about 60-40. We had 40% that we were ready to go, 60 didn't. Interesting, is that a failure? I don't think so. It was intelligence. It was like, oh, we want to measure that, but we're not there. And then you can see that there are different levels of why are they not there? And we addressed it in different ways depending on what the need was. These two things are really critical that I want to talk about just briefly. We also learned that while going through this process and working with the departments, there's in our minds, two areas of readiness. One is the data, like where's the data, is it collected, is it in a format that's helpful, is it meaningful to the public, et cetera. But there's a whole nother one that I think maybe knew unconsciously, but when we really started to get into it, is the organization ready to be thinking about data and management of information? And that's really about process, it's really about structure, it's really about staffing and resources, and at least not as much to do with the data. Like, are they ready to think about this? Do they have methodologies that they use to actually look at information before they make those decisions? A few speakers earlier today have talked about that. But this was great to be thinking about this in these two different ways as we continued. And then, so that was a lesson learned. And here's another kind of area of lesson learned. Some we also knew and part of our goals, but what was the value to the department? A big piece, and Beth had mentioned this, is honor what the work has been done in the departments. Relationships are critical to doing this work. And their respect and your respect for them was a basis for how we did the engagement. We wanted to acknowledge what was there and then be able to provide additional assistance. Build space and capacity, expand in everyday management, we talked about that. Support with analytical tools and resources. We brought some of these tools to bear from Socrata and other places. Reduce manual touches on the data. That's why we automated the Tableau site. It's now they're just putting data in there and it's actually updating. Actionable data frequency refreshed. So there is like a cadence on this data action plan on when they will be reporting. So that's understandable. Mayor, public, budget office, and again the community, frankly, because some of this is being produced there. Identify and remove barriers to using data in management. I think one of the things that we're hoping to do now is to make sure we tie this into the budget process. It does in an indirect way, but we want to make a stronger connection there, so that's a stretch goal for us. And I think just as a quote one of our staff uses quite frequently, unless you're keeping score, it's difficult to know whether you're winning or losing. It applies to ball games, and no less to government productivity. That first half is really the part that we focus on quite a bit, is this is really important and you won't be able to measure and get things done unless you're taking a look at it. So that's the end of that. Maybe we move into questions?
Sure, if they're already. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay. Maybe it's too late for questions.
Oh, the mic's not on to the audience, just folks in the back.
Hello?
Okay.
There it is.
All right. Building department. When you did the deep dive and you started to collect a lot of information, how did you do that in a way where you weren't imposing a lot of burden on a small workforce? How'd you get that data without overtaxing them?
Yeah, that's a good question because, like I said, this was an area that was already a concern for us. We didn't have enough staff or enough time, and now we're asking them to do something else. We do all of our permitting 100% electronically, and so we were able to have just a couple of reports created by some programmers for us, and then we were able to use those reports to extract most of the data fairly easily.
I had a question regarding the readiness, organizational versus data and tech. Yeah, I appreciate you making that distinction. It seems like, well, did you come into cases where the data was ready and the organization wasn't? Because it seems like they'd have to be related.
Yes, and that's odd. It seems unintuitive because you think if they've got their data ready, they're ready to look at it. In some cases, they weren't, and it wasn't necessarily resistance. It was just they hadn't really thought about how they're going to use it in their management process. Some individuals may be using it on a daily kind of today basis, but it's rolling it up to a higher level was a challenge at times.
Could any of you talk about the role of mayoral or executive leadership in making the stuff actually happen once you build all these awesome dashboards and stuff?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yes. So we're very lucky that we have Mayor Ben McAdams in Salt Lake County, and he definitely believes in sort of data-driven government and data-informed decision-making. It's a lot easier to say that than to actually do it. And I think that one of the things that I have learned very deeply in my last 2 years of intensely doing this work is you can provide with the data what you see as like a silver bullet for a political decision, right? I mean, particularly in Brittany's case, we went into one of our MIMS meetings with, we're spending this much. We've spent this much on plan review. This is before we got to where we are now. It would cost this much to just hire a new plan reviewer. And as it turns out, there were a whole lot of other kind of political issues happening. We were going through a big kind of like total pay and comp reorg. Like there are always going to be these convoluting issues. So one of the things that I wish that I had known and what I would encourage others to do is to, before you bring what you think is like a very tight and organized team with a well-informed and data-rich argument, to kind of do some of that political back channeling, if you will. Sit down and say, like, this is what we're going to bring to you. Because I've had a couple of disappointing meetings where, you know, I'm like, you guys are all set, you're all ready, and then you get in there and it's like, it kind of falls flat. And I think that what happens sometimes is that we don't sit down with, you know, executive leadership and say, you know, this is what we're bringing to you. What is the feedback we're going to get? So then you can pivot. And then you can also kind of inform your staff, because the worst thing you can do for morale, right, is to get everybody excited about something and then have a bad meeting where, you know, the end is not what you thought. And so I think we have had really good support. He's kind of like, go for it. But I think people at those levels are also dealing with a lot of different things that weigh in on a decision. And if we're better in tune to that, to do that prep, I think we can kind of smooth the runway for them. That's just my pro tip. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It opens lots of doors that are normally shut if you have executive level support champion. And it's very helpful to have the top elected official, but if you can get someone at that executive level that may not be that person, but helps bring that person along, it's very, lots of great leverage.
I have a follow-up. Is there time?
Sure.
Last question, sure.
So, let's say you have an executive who's a fan of data, but is kind of old school, let's say, loves
Are you asking for a friend?
This is a hypothetical. Yeah. Loves spreadsheets, even paper charts on the wall, for instance, that are marked every week. I don't know, I'm curious if you have experience in moving those folks to a more digital, machine readable, et cetera, format.
I don't think I've had that direct experience, but I have seen people light up when they see things visualized. So it's really great, actually, even having come from budget and certainly prefer seeing blocks and columns and rows of data and manipulating that the way I want to in a pivot table. Showing a historical trend line over time with a couple of key pieces of data information. I think for some of those leaders, and it's sort of like, oh, I see where this could go. And that may be a piece of success, is showing it in a highly succinct visualization.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that people kind of have glommed onto about having, you know, data to look at or having it on paper, and I still have people, you know, who like want the PowerPoint in advance or whatever to print it out. Like, for real? But is that one of the things that we found, especially even with MIMS and definitely at Salt Lake County largely, is that, you know, data begets more data. And it's really more about the questions than it is about the data. And so I think that what those people are eager to do is not have a meeting where everyone just looks at like one chart. Like you kind of saw for our planning and development one, we had so many. We tried to like have a brainstorming session to say, if you were the guy who was making the decisions, what questions would you ask? So that we could literally like fire back to every question with another data point. So it was like, how many reviews are being done? What percentage of reviews is that? How many are done by a third party? Well, what's the cost per review? What's that by month? What percentage of that is how much we're spending a year? So like, you know, we really did all that so you can show kind of the agility of a good platform. And I think that can be helpful. And maybe also just coming in one day and being like, here's the paper version. Here's this. Like, come on, let's move on. I think that's it. Thank you all for coming. I know it's late in the afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.